everyone, it's Megan. Welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for joining me here today. If you're new here, hello. Go ahead and make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring the little bell so you can be notified of when I post a new video. And go ahead and give this video a thumbs up if you like it. Today, I am going to be talking about offerings and devotionals in a pagan faith. So the first thing that needs to be discussed is the difference between an offering and a devotional and the definitions of both. So an offering is a form of sacrifice. Now I know sacrifice can be a scary word depending on your connotation and and your associations with the word itself, but in a modern context, a sacrifice can be anything that is a loss to you. So food, time, objects, those can all be considered sacrifices. Therefore, they can be considered an offering. On the other side, a devotional is something that you do for someone else. So it's like a form of dedication, like charity work or volunteering or creating. So those are the differences between an offering and a devotional. An offering, you are sacrificing something, you are giving something up. And a devotional, you are dedicating something to someone or something else. Okay. So an example of these, an offering would be like leaving heavy cream out for the good neighbors, or also known as the Fae if you are not of Irish pagan faith, or a shot of whiskey out for Briege. Now, an example of a devotional would be like doing charity work, volunteering at a soup kitchen in the name of your god or goddess, or donating your time to teaching someone how to play an instrument in the name of your god or goddess. Those are forms of devotion. So there are a lot of reasons why people give offerings to their gods or goddesses or land spirits or entities or energies in their area. This is going to vary vastly depending on your own personal practice. Now, the three most common reasons for someone giving an offering or a devotional is requirement by a deity or religion, a participation in a symbiotic exchange, which I'll talk about, and a form of reverence or worship. So let's talk about those real quick. The first one that I listed was a requirement by a god or goddess or a religion. So this would be you are devoted to a particular deity, or you follow a particular path that requires the regular acts of offering and devotionals. Honestly, off the top of my head, I can't think of any right now, but that doesn't mean that there aren't any out there that are in the pagan sphere. One thing that I can think of that isn't pagan, but it's a good example, is tithing in the Christian church. So if you don't know what tithing is when you go to your church service, sometimes they'll pass around these little buckets and you give money to the church. That's a tithe. Now, there are some that say you have to give 10% of your salary to the church, and then some people give pennies because it's what they can afford. So in this case, if you give 10% of what you earn, that would be considered a sacrifice because that's 10% of your earnings that could have gone to something else. So I know that's not a pagan example. However, I think it's still a good example. And if you have a religion or a god or a goddess that requires offerings of you, leave it in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you and your perspective and how you go about doing your offerings and devotionals. The next one that I mentioned is a symbiotic exchange. So let's define symbiotic for those of you that aren't familiar. So according to Lexico, powered by Oxford, a symbiotic relationship is a mutually beneficial relationship between different people or groups. I'll leave a link to that definition in the description below. So a symbiotic relationship is basically like You scratch my back and I'll scratch yours, right? You are exchanging something in return for something else. And this can be a symbiotic relationship between you and the land. Maybe, like our ancestors, you're trying to grow crops, and the ancestors would give offerings to the land in order for the crops to flourish and grow. That sort of thing can still happen today. You can give offerings to the land around you to help your plants grow. You can give offerings to a specific god or goddess in exchange for, healing or wisdom or whatever that particular god or goddess has to offer you. Now, a symbiotic relationship between you and a deity might be different, and that's a completely personal thing. So I'm not going to go into too much detail about that in general, but I can talk about my own personal practice with that in a little bit. The last one that I mentioned is giving an offering or a devotional as a form of worship or reverence. Now, this is something that I personally do on a regular basis, and it's just a form of me saying to Brige, hey, I'm here. This is for you. I don't expect anything in return. This is a thanks to you for being in my life and helping me when I need it, etc., etc. So this is, I guess you can see it as a form of prayer, if that helps you understand it better. And like I said, there are a lot of different reasons and beings that people give offerings to, especially within any sort of pagan faith. So the most common recipient of an offering is going to be a god or a goddess. Then you have people who give offerings to their ancestors. People give offerings to the land spirits, and sprites and dryads, depending on, their particular faith. And then there are so many different spiritual beings out there that you can give offerings to that it would be impossible for me to name them all because I don't know them all. So if you want to give an offering to a particular entity that you interact with on a regular basis or that you feel might be in or around your home, just communicate with that being and figure out what they would like best. That leads me into my next point of the question that I see asked a lot is, well, what do I offer? What do I have to give? And that's really going to depend on who you're giving an offering to. So I used an example at the top of the video about giving heavy cream to the good neighbors. Now, the good neighbors, if you're not part of Irish paganism, they are also known as the Fae. And they like sweet things. They like heavy cream and honey and milk. So those sorts of things would be acceptable offerings if you're going to make an offering to them. Now, if you're giving an offering to a god or a goddess and you don't know what to give, the first thing you're going to want to do is look at their stories, look at their mythology, see if you can figure out something that they would like. So for me, for example, Brige, on a regular basis, as part of my devotion to her, I light the candles on my altar and I keep them lit for as long as I can whenever I'm home. Brige is a fire goddess. That's something that really resonates between her and I, and we have come to terms that that is currently an acceptable offering. She does like an offering of whiskey because she's an Irish goddess. However, I don't leave whiskey out for her because I have a child and I have small animals that can get up onto my altar, and that's just not safe. So we have come to terms, or we have come to an agreement that the things that I offer her currently are acceptable. So what you're going to offer to whatever entity is completely between you and that entity. So if you're coming forward to a goddess, for example, and you want to introduce yourself to them and you do not have a previous relationship, you're going to want to check the lore, check the myths, and see if you can speak with someone who has a relationship with that particular goddess that is willing to share information with you. And then if you want to give an offering to an entity that you already have a relationship with, all you have to do is ask them what they want. Now, sometimes an offering might be a physical object, a physical thing, like coins or food or something of that nature. Sometimes it's going to be your time or your suffering. And that sounds bad, but it's not always suffering as pain. It might be doing something outside of your comfort zone to really push you and help you grow. I'll leave a link in the description below to an Irish pagan priestess that I subscribe to her YouTube channel. I watch all of her videos. I follow her blog. She's a great resource for Irish paganism. But she has a video where she discusses an offering or like a requirement that a god has asked of her and her partner. I'll leave that in the link, or I'll leave that in the description below, because it's really interesting and it gives a new perspective on what might be required of you by a god or a goddess. Now, the last thing I want to talk about here really quick is, should you give offerings? Should you do devotionals? And the short answer for that is, I don't know. I don't have an answer for that question because it's an entirely personal question. It is all going to depend on your personal practice and your relationships with the entities that you are looking to make an offering to. There are some people who don't make offerings, and it works for them. There are some people like me who do offerings and devotionals on a regular basis, and it works for me. It helps keep me connected and keep the lines of communication in my heart and my mind open to Brigitte and her messages. So it's very personal, and it's all going to depend. So I'm sorry I don't have an answer for you on that one. It's just going to be something that you have to think about, meditate on, and communicate with the entities that you are trying to build a relationship with. So I hope this was helpful. I hope maybe you learned something new or it gave you some ideas. If you have any questions or comments, suggestions, or even your own personal perspective, leave them in the comments below. I would love to hear how you do your offerings and devotionals, and maybe some of the things that you do as devotions, because I know what I do, but maybe you have another idea. So I will see you in the next video. Bye for now.